Hello there! Are you too re-examining the Halloween trilogy that concluded last year because of the recent abysmal release of The Exorcist Believer? You and your loved ones may be entitled to some compensation in the form of entertaining YouTube videos hosted by yours truly, the Antichrist. Pleased to make your acquaintance. Yes, I came straight out of Satan's womb. I was put on this earth to talk about horror movies. This channel serves as the platform for my own personal cult, of which you are welcome to join. All you have to do is click subscribe. Father would be even more pleased if you clicked the like button and the notification bell, that way you never miss our next meeting. Today's meeting has a rather interesting order of business. Today we're going to be comparing the 2018 Halloween film to its novelization. We're also going to get some more fire up in here because what? Fire King! Ooh, that's a bit much. Okay, it's alright. I decided to finally read the entire trilogy this year and catch up on any lore that I might have missed. I'm gonna loosely walk through the plot of the movie and the book and then just go over all the differences as we go. So I'll be going over all of the lore that we didn't get in the movies, all of the character insights, and there are some plot inconsistencies or just plot holes as well. I'll be showing scenes of Halloween 2018 as I compare them to give you guys a little bit more context. I also bought the big ol' making of book, so you don't have to. That book is so full of nothing, by the way. It's literally just like a coffee table book, but there are a few more insights for Halloween Kills and Ends. There's just a couple for Halloween 2018. So I will be referring to that book a few times to provide even more context when I can. Little disclaimer, I'm gonna be reading a lot of quotes in this video and dissecting them. So just know what you're getting into. Grab a snack, grab a drink, settle in. I think this little mini-series that I'm doing covering these three movies will also help us better get into the mind of David Gordon Green, as well as, of course, Danny McBride, his partner, and John Passarella, who was the author of this novelization. Especially because I feel like each of the three authors that adapted the three books had very different ideas in mind from both one another and the filmmakers, especially in Halloween Ends, but that video is coming out in a few days, so I guess you'll have to subscribe and stay tuned. For my returning cult members, do you like the new setup? I'm still gonna be working with the lights, and this probably isn't the finalized look. I do want to hone it and get it looking perfect, but this is the first video in this location, and I think I'm gonna stay here for a while. I really like it. Feels a little bit more cozy. You see more of my room. This is my space. This is me. Okay, my little maggots, let's jump right into things. In the opening of David Gordon Green's Halloween, the podcasters are introduced to Dr. Ranbir Sartain, who just fills them in on everything people new to the franchise may have missed. He talks about being a student of Dr. Loomis, how over 50 psychiatrists have seen Michael and no one's made any progress, how Dr. Loomis thought that he was just pure evil. The entire opening scene isn't reimagined in the slightest in the novel, but there is some context you might like to know. Maybe worth pointing out that the patient who has an affinity for shoelaces, Tivoli, is going to be a very important character in Halloween Kills if you recognize him now. Where things start to get interesting though is page 17, where we begin to learn more about Allison as a character, and this was actually a deleted scene in the movie. I don't know if this is in the deleted scene, but in the book she goes for a run and she passes by this dog and the dog starts barking at her. They're setting this up for something later on, but what interested me more was her mentality during this scene. She chided herself for breaking one of the cardinal rules for running alone: always be aware of your surroundings. Her seize the day mentality had a relevant corollary: stay in the moment, not always easy for someone her age. Like her friends, she tended to agonize over past missteps and then second and triple guess every future decision. With practically her whole life in front of her, she had as many ways to succeed as to spiral into failure due to poor choices. But that wasn't the real worry. What if the path to success were obscured and hard to find, while the roads to failure were broad? Or the ultimate fear that success waited at the far end of a tightrope in a rough wind. I never got the vibe from the movies that Allison was the same nerdo type as Laurie, or that she was some Patrick Bateman-esque weirdo who was so concerned about success and her future. I get that maybe on an artistic level, John Passarella was thinking that he wanted to fill her out as a character a little bit more, or do a little bit more foreshadowing or something, or he just needed to reach a minimum page count. I don't know. I do wish they kept that scene in the final cut because it really feels like it's paying homage to the original, and I know the movie is full of homages anyways. It's basically a remake. And again, I don't think I pulled a quote for it, but later on in the book, Allison goes on another run and she finds that same dog dead. He's been strung up, obviously, by Michael. And Allison sees a man in the same Bronco that the podcasters were driving that Michael stole from the gas station. Also, killing and eating dogs is the most heinous thing that Michael does and really sets him apart from any of the other classic killers, so I wouldn't have minded that included conclusion. Moving on to a very important dialogue difference. It was changed from the scene where we meet Allison and family in the movie. Also worth noting because I'm willing to bet that these books were written based off of the original scripts, and they're not actually based on the movies, but it is weird because in the original script, Karen's name used to be Shanna. I've never met anyone in my life with the name Shanna. But anyway, in both the book and the script, Ray snaps his finger on his silly little mousetrap. In the book, he just says, "God damn it," when in the movie, of course, he says,
"I got peanut butter on my penis."
There's actually a fan edit on YouTube where someone just took that line out and they said, "Ray no longer has peanut butter on his penis." Given that that line is not in the book and that the book was released just 4 days after the film in 2018, I'm assuming the book was written directly from the script and not from the movie, so I think we can kind of better understand some of the filmmaker's original intentions. And also because that peanut butter line was obviously improvised on set, and David Gordon Green was probably like, "Yo, we are using that in the final cut, dude." This is probably the third or fourth time that I've brought that line up on my channel. It's just so embarrassing. I get so much secondhand embarrassment. Here's where we're finally reintroduced to Laurie, and I do need to give 2 trigger warnings for some pretty heavy topics that are brought up in the book. Here we delve into themes of unaliving oneself and substance abuse, so if that's not for you, then either skip ahead or click off, do whatever you need to do. There's a part of the book that actually describes this deleted scene, so they did shoot this for the movie where Laurie is having one of her darkest moments and she's contemplating taking her own life. However, the deleted scenes do not include this. So she's just finished contemplating taking her own life when this happens. The shape stood before her, waiting to strike, waiting for her to surrender. She remained balanced, paralyzed between bzzz. The sound startled her out of the moment, maybe even pulled her back from a precipice. She stared ahead. The shape was gone, never there, always with her. So it's this kind of odd moment where Laurie's having a PTSD hallucination of Michael standing right before her before the reporters show up. You'll notice that a lot of the heavier moments of the book are pretty sanitized for the movies. The script is also pretty similar to the movie. The only difference really that I could see is that there's much more of an emphasis on how dirty her home is. But where it says she's considering the bullet, it doesn't explicitly mention that she's considering unaliving herself. Nor does it say that she hallucinates the shape, so I don't know if that was just kind of an interesting liberty that Passarella took while writing the book. Hallucinations are actually a very common symptom of PTSD, but I do think that cinematically they usually come off pretty tacky, so I'm glad they didn't do that. Another small thing a few pages later becomes a running motif, and I just need to ask why. Because you also see it in the deleted scene. She is guzzling down on this strawberry milk, and it's a big thing in the book. And that's very disturbing to me. That's sociopathic behavior. I've seen really cute little pictures of strawberry milk online, and some of that does look kind of good, but when I think of strawberry milk, I think of those like Nesquik bottles, and I'm like, what the hell what is strawberry milk? Maybe they all thought that was a good indicator that she was off her nut, and I would have to agree. I don't know a single living soul that consumes strawberry milk, and if you do, I'm sorry. Moving on to some character lore that is more insightful than creepy. In the book, we do learn a lot more about how Karen is a child psychologist. Inside the Haddonfield Harmony Community Center, Karen sat at the head of a table in her therapy room, which, due to the gathering of preteen children, had the appearance of a classroom. But these kids were at-risk youths surviving in less than desirable home situations or shuffling between foster homes, some of them victims of abuse. In almost all cases, they were dealing with emotional issues that would be troubling for adults, let alone children their age. Some exhibited signs of PTSD. To me, I think the intention is clear to draw a comparison between these children suffering with PTSD and Laurie, who is clearly suffering the same issue. I think it's a really interesting point of Karen's character because it shows how her upbringing informed her career choice, but also that she somehow manages having enough empathy to be treating all these children with PTSD, and yet she can't extend the same level of grace towards her mother. So it's sort of an interesting, a little bit of a mystery they set up in the book that becomes more clear as the books go on. I think it adds a more complex layer to their relationship. I like that it's more fleshed out in the book, especially because later Laurie drives to Karen's place of work to speak with her, but then ultimately decides against it. Laurie sat in the pickup truck for several minutes while the cooling engine ticked, tapping her fingers on the steering wheel, then heaved a sigh. She wanted to clear the air between her and her daughter, and not only for Allison's sake. Was it fair to confront Karen in her workplace with a personal matter? Would she be receptive or defensive? With strong emotions involved, any discussion could go either way. The last thing Laurie wanted was to sour Karen's professional relationships, damaging an area of her daughter's life untainted by Laurie's obsessions. Okay, Laurie thought, a discussion for another time then. It's just so ironic that Laurie thinks that Karen's work work is the one thing that's been untainted by her obsession when it really couldn't be further from the truth. It's a cool exploration of generational trauma where instead of falling into the same toxic cycle, Karen has fallen to the other end of the spectrum, seemingly having taken a vow to not let any of these children end up the way that her mother did. In the original script, we get a little bit more context because Laurie does go into her office. She admits that she's been petitioning for Michael's transfer so she can move her past behind her, but Karen is like, that's great, but I don't know if I can put our past behind me. It turns out they did actually shoot the scene, but it didn't make the final cut, as you see in the making of book here. Maybe next year I should go through all the differences of the script to the movie because there are so many of them and it's interesting to see how the script did or did not inform the film. But now to move on to the man of the hour himself, Michael Myers. This scene of the book doesn't really add anything, but I do like that we get the perspective of the guard that has to transfer Michael. There he is, Kuhneman thought, nothing unusual. The shape stood on the far side of the cell, his back turned to the door. Again, Kuhneman noted how still Myers seemed, no shifting foot to foot, no swaying. His arms hung at his sides, not the slightest twitch of a finger. A marble statue couldn't move any less. I like this inclusion because it again stresses how inhuman he is. It's kind of hard to do that in the movie besides just the fact that they shoot him with bullets and he doesn't die. I know it's just been a lot of lore so far, but they set up a lot of it in the book. We're gonna jump forward though to Michael's escape and the cardinal sin of this movie where the young boy is killed. If you remember in the movie, the boy is passionate about dancing.
Right now, dancing is my thing, and it really hits me in the heart.
Originally, all the times that I've watched this movie, I was just thinking, oh, it's nice. The screenwriter is not shying away from writing a young boy that has a more feminine interest. This could be a learning moment for a lot of the members of the audience. But then I got to that moment in the book, and it's talking about how college football is his favorite subject of discussion. And I was like, wait, whoa. Boo! Boring! Boring! Vince Mattis had never even auditioned for a movie before, Green declares, and when he got there, we all knew we were working with a star. I rewrote it on the spot with him so that he could take advantage of being amazing. Moving on to something that is definitely kind of irrelevant, and I understand why they removed it. There is a semi-detailed encounter of a Psycho ripoff that turns into a sex scene. A moment later, a shape moved through the doorway, a vague silhouette at first. As it took several steps closer, the indistinct figure resolved into the shape of a man who then stood still, waiting. Something about the silhouette disturbed her on a subconscious level. Something not quite human. A naked man, save for the pale Michael Myers mask with its shock of brown hair that hid his face, stood before her. Her scream died in her throat, flushed away with a surge of relief. Even with his face hidden, she recognized his tall physique. Room for one more? Aaron asked. That's right, in the book, our podcasters are bumpin' uglies, and it's also in a deleted scene, as you saw. I think they were right to leave that out because it adds nothing. I don't need to know about the sex lives of these podcasters. I really don't. I don't really care about those characters at all, let alone what they're doing in the bedroom. Like, save your Psycho homage for another day, for something better. Moving on, who wants more lore about Laurie's psyche? This is from a weird scene right after their disastrous dinner where Laurie decides to drunkenly drive home but stay in her car rather than going in her house. In her drunken state, she feels like being in her car is the safer option if Michael were to actually come to her house that night. Laurie decided more of her problems were alcohol related than she wanted to admit to Ray, or to herself. Easy to keep a secret when everyone refuses to talk to you. A glutton for punishment, she twisted the rearview mirror down to look at herself and instantly regretted it. Oh my. With a groan, she pushed open the door and stumbled down from the pickup, her legs so stiff she almost fell on her face before regaining her balance. After a few deep breaths of cool autumn air, her dizziness passed and she lumbered toward her front door, keys in hand. Oh yeah, and there she goes, making her strawberry milk again. Freak shit. The book doesn't shy away from the PTSD stuff or the substance abuse. It's very ugly, real stuff, and I feel like the book does it justice. I like that we get a somewhat of an internal monologue from Laurie where she's admitting to herself that she has more of a problem than she wanted to admit before. Now back to those people we don't really care about. Aaron's death scene is a little bit funnier in the book to me. In that moment of contact, she glimpsed Aaron's bloody face, his jaw sagging. He was alive but barely conscious. Then the intruder pulled him back and tossed him aside, hurling his body toward the far corner of the restroom where he crashed helplessly into the trash can. That part made me giggle because what do you mean Michael threw him into a trash can? That's about as unceremonious of a death as you can get. I think that I'm glad they didn't do that in the movie. Not that I care about the character, but this was like the Act 1 turning point, so we needed to be serious for a little longer to establish the atmosphere. Let's now move on to some more Allison lore though. At this point of the book, she is feeling nervous about going to the dance with Cameron. She had agreed to get out of her comfort zone and go to the dance, chance, but only because Vicky served as her mobile comfort zone. Guys had wingmen and girls had, what, besties? Oh my god. Without Vicky there, a group hang would feel more like an honest-to-goodness date. I don't get this. In the movie, Allison seems so much more confident. She's not just like another copy-pasted Laurie Strode, and I really like that. In the book, and maybe also the original version of the script, she's this success-stressed, antisocial weirdo who is apparently unaware that she's very much already dating Cameron. Girl, he met your parents. What do you mean you're nervous about going to a school dance and that feeling like a date? I feel like for most normal people, you go on a bunch of dates, you're dating someone for several months maybe before you're like, hey, do you want to meet my parents? Anyway, in the movie, she's a little more apprehensive because Oscar is gonna be their third wheel, and that I understand. Her whole trepidation with Cameron gets even more confusing like 4 pages later because then she starts pouring her soul out to him. I'm fine, Allison assured him. I couldn't sleep. I was so embarrassed about last night. I'm sorry you had to see that. It's a weird time for me, I guess. I understand. I like to think I'm above all that, Allison said, the family baggage, but everything is all tied together. The way I was raised by my mom was a reaction to the weird way she was raised by her mom, and all of that is because of what happened to my grandmother way before I was born. Like, that is your boyfriend. Ugh, ridiculous. I wish the dialogue of the movie was this deep, though. There's a little bit of it in that cutout scene that I was just showing, but in the book, it's really front and center about how Allison feels about her grandmother. It also, I think, better shows this generational difference where Gen Z has learned a lot of therapy speak, but even if sometimes people on the internet are abusing that, our generation is a lot more emotionally intelligent than any other that came before us. A lot of people in my generation are very pro-therapy. They're very pro-breaking toxic generational cycles, and I feel like Allison is emblematic of that. The next quote also frustrates me a lot, but this time, Officer Hawkins is the lucky winner who's infuriating me. Sheriff Barker is telling Hawkins they can't officially call for a manhunt because it has not been confirmed that Michael Myers is in fact roaming around. He also doesn't want a crazy media storm because he's an elected official and he wants to be seen as competent in his position. Hawkins bit his tongue before expressing his first frustrated thought, which would have included a choice profanity or two. Like it or not, Barker was his boss. He proceeded diplomatically, I strongly disagree, sir. Let this be my case. If this is who we think it is, we have one order of business: hunt this man down. And we will, Barker said, as soon as we confirm he is the one responsible for this mess. With a soft sigh of resignation, Hawkins turned away. The man lived in a state of denial, delaying the inevitable. Ignoring this problem wouldn't make it go away. At least if they made an announcement that Myers was loose in town, everyone would be on the lookout for an older man dressed in a gas station mechanic's coveralls. Instead, they'd have to wait and see where he would strike next. This made me feel weird about Hawkins. I'll admit I find him a much less sympathetic character after this. You mean to tell me that our hero, our lovely little Hawkins, a character that I really like, would rather just bow down to his boss than potentially save a ton of people's lives by insisting that they call for a manhunt? This doesn't ring true to the Hawkins I know that we later learn saved Michael Myers' life on Halloween night. In his head, he's literally saying that people at least deserve to know that they should be on the lookout, but he didn't even fight to give them that chance. But it's okay, because now we're going from one of my least favorite moments of the book to one of my favorites, getting into the mind, literally, of Michael Myers. We all know that incredible oneer where Michael is back on the streets of Haddonfield, right? So this quote is from his perspective in that moment. The shape watches the woman collapse into her chair, her open eyes vacant as her head falls forward to strike the tablecloth. Dropping the bloody hammer to the tiled floor, the shape walks to the counter, reaches past the cutting board, and picks up the black-handled knife. The shape turns the sturdy knife back and forth to catch the gleam of light on the sharp blade. Satisfying. They get rid of that Michael POV in the Halloween Ends novel, which bummed me out because I really like the stylization of the book. I love seeing that he's satisfied by the gleam of a knife. I think it does just enough to give us like a hint of his perspective. Everything else is very dry, very factual, which is kind of how I think Michael sees the world in black and white. I also found this snippet from the making of fascinating concerning how James Jude Courtney crafted the character. Courtney studied the Halloween films, but says his real muse for playing Michael was his cat, Percival, who he even brought to his hotel room on location. I watched the way he hunts and the way he moves, and that's much of what I did for that character. We don't judge a cat for being a cat, and so I was not judging or trying to define Michael in moral or philosophical terms. When I met David for the first time, he talked about wanting him to move like a cat, so we were in full agreement on how we wanted the shape to move. And we will get more into Michael's perspective later on, don't you worry. But back to Allison's perspective, of course Cameron does the most annoying thing ever. He kisses another girl and then acts angry at Allison, and we're all like, dude, what? In the book, this moment is a little bit more intense, and we are provided a little bit more context. Cameron and Kim turn around. Unlike Allison, Cameron was smiling until he noticed Allison staring at the two of them. Then he pulled away from Kim and called, Allison, come here. Allison shook her head a definitive no. Cameron nodded. Again, Allison shook her head. Turning sideways for a moment, he pulled up the metal flask in his pocket and took a quick sip before hiding it again. He whispered something to Kim, whereupon Allison's imagination ran wild, wondering what he'd said to her. So now she's confronting him, and he says, yeah, he said flatly, every time I turn around, you're buried in your phone, looking at it, texting with people, talking with people, it sucks. And I didn't do anything with Kim. She came up to me. Don't cry about it. Blame me, Allison said. Blame Kim. Everyone but Cameron. Whatever. You're drunk, she said angrily. Oscar got you fucked up. Exactly, Cameron said, smiling. See? Not my fault. First of all, Cameron ditches Kim immediately in the movie, and it doesn't even look like he is the one who kissed her. It's the other way around. He's also wasted in the movie, but not to this extent, and it doesn't seem like it's that big of an issue because he even fesses up to it. In the movie, he says, no, I got me fucked up. It doesn't seem indicative of a much larger issue like it very much is in the book. He just seems like some shallow asshole in the movie. It's not that deep. Where in the book, it gets a lot more into how he's kind of like this troubled kid who is engaging in dangerous forms of avoidance. He also calls out Allison for something that is not really contextualized in the movie, except but once. She takes one phone call from Vicky during the dance. But if she really was constantly on her phone and he wasn't just making that up, then I'd be pissed about that too. I hate when people are on their phones when I'm with them. I don't care, maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I need people's undivided attention. I find that really, really rude. Does that make Cameron right here? God, no. But maybe Cameron does have some feelings that are a little bit more valid than we initially thought. Because what, she has one phone call in the movie, the rest of the montage, they're having a great time. But let's check back in with our good man, Dr. Ranbir Sartain, with this next quote. In the movie, we don't get this juicy bit of Dr. Sartain's cover-up story. Sheriff Barker frowned. What I want to know is, why didn't he kill you? I tried to hide, Sartain said, but he found me, chained to his seat. He looked down at me, I closed my eyes, and when I opened them, he walked away. With a slight nod towards Hawkins, he added, I was rescued by this officer man. The first part of his dialogue is still in the movie, but then he's cut off by Laurie showing up. I think it was smart to cut that from the movie because literally any type of cover-up story that Sartain came up with would have made him seem suspicious. It's better that that remains more ambiguous, that way we don't see the twist coming. Of course, then we go back to Allison and Cameron, and this would have been a really interesting scene to include in the movie. I don't know why this was cut out. Well, I have a theory, but more on that later. In the book, Cameron chases her down and he's like, I'll fix it, I'll figure it out, I'll make it good as new. And he's like, I've had too much gin, I told you Kim was talking to me, she came up to me, she still has feelings for me and I'm trying to be respectful of her, she also has eating issues. So we get a little bit more lore about Kim as a character, which interestingly, she'll come back up in Halloween Ends, which of course we don't care about because he's just making excuses, right? But I do like getting more into Cameron's psyche. I feel like his motives are so much better explained in the book. But continuing on, this scene makes Halloween Kills make so much more sense. I'm kind of pissed they took it out because I kind of started to be like, okay, Cameron, maybe you're not all that bad. But then it's like whiplash because these police officers come over and they tell them that they need to go home, that it's not safe out. And Cameron, instead of being chill and being like, all right, he starts talking back to them to the point where he gets arrested because he's being so rude, which normally I wouldn't cheer on, but he was drunk as a skunk and he was underage on school grounds, you know, and talking back to them like, dude. In the book, this scene is expanded upon even more by revealing that Cameron has had a history with the police department. Turns out at age 12, he threw some rotten eggs at police officers from this department, and so a lot of them were still holding a grudge. Lots of Cameron lore that I was not expecting, to be honest. We also got some Karen lore that I was expecting. We learned why she's wearing that awful vintage Christmas sweater in Halloween and Halloween Kills. Wearing her Christmas sweater, she was determined to avoid thinking about the current holiday by focusing on a more joyful one. Pretty self-explanatory, as is this next plot hole. Tell me what became of his childhood home. That place was a shrine kind of thing, but for serial killer groupies and death metal bands, Hawkins told him. Vandals got the best of it, Hawkins continued. A local organization that I work with tore it down and turned it into a community garden. Turned tragedy into beauty, if you can believe it. And wouldn't you know it, they're talking about Michael Myers' home in that scene. That's weird, because it comes back in Halloween Kills. Mysteriously got rebuilt, I guess. Tell me you didn't have a plan for a trilogy without telling me you didn't have a plan for a trilogy. In the making of book, we get the first insight that this really was not planned. Everyone expected Halloween 2018 to be successful, but nobody thought it was going to be so successful that a trilogy seemed almost mandated. I didn't think, I hoped, Blum laughs. I had it in the back of my mind when we first started. Then he saw the reaction of the audience at a test screening of Halloween in Long Island. I thought, we're gonna need to make some more of these movies. In part 2 of this miniseries, I will get into more of their original plans for Halloween Kills. I just can't believe that nobody thought to go back and tighten this book up a little bit just in case Halloween 2018 was successful, which it was bound to be. Like, play the long game. Wait to release this novel until like a year after the movie releases. Extend the hype. Promise more juicy lore that people can fill themselves in on right before Halloween Kills releases. It just comes off kind of lazy to me how the editing and the release of this novel was handled. Anyway, let's get back into the mind of Michael Myers, a very fun place to be. With each deep breath, the fingers clench the handle in dark anticipation of death. This clench and relax cycle is not a conscious act. The heart beats, the lungs breathe, the hand clenches. The shape hunts and the shape kills, always ready. Inhale, exhale, clench, release, hunt, kill. One leads to the other. This is all the shape knows or wants, the true purpose. Revealing that Michael has wants and needs, but I like that he is referred to exclusively as the shape in this book, and without pronouns. He's always the shape, no matter how repetitive that becomes. Non-binary icon? On a real note though, the true purpose stuff is kind of weird. I don't necessarily enjoy that there might be some grander plan to it all. I like my Michael empty of motivation and just mindlessly killing. Another quick plot hole here also about Officer Hawkins. Just quick, just a little small thing here. Dr. Sartain stared down at the corpse of Officer Hawkins. The blood pulsing from the man's neck had stopped within moments. If he wasn't clinically dead yet, that moment was only a few feeble heartbeats away. Sartain inhaled, smelling the fresh blood, filling his lungs with the moment of the kill. His kill. The what of Officer Hawkins? The corpse? His kill? Nelson says that Hawkins' death was originally supposed to be a little more elaborate makeup-wise. Due to time restraints in the middle of the night, we ended up doing it right on set, probably 10 minutes before we shot it, with just a bladder and a tube and some makeup. This turned out to be a good thing because once it was decided Hawkins should be part of Halloween Kills, a more graphic injury would have made it harder to explain his survival. I'm telling you, tell me you did not plan out this trilogy without telling me you did not plan out this trilogy. I'm glad they didn't kill Officer Hawkins. He's one of my favorite characters of the new trilogy. I'm just a little dumbfounded at the sheer lack of any type of a structured plan on the off chance that 2018 would be successful. Of course, things always change, sometimes the day of, like we just read here. That's not what I'm knocking them for. But Hawkins becomes, if not a leading, then a very important secondary character. That's the type of decision that I don't think you can make lightly, and I just think would have benefited from being preconceived. Now moving on to Sartain's death. In the movie, Michael smashes him against the wheel, and that's how he gets out of the car. Then we get the famous brain smash, one of my favorite kills. With much grunting and shifting of his feet, Sartain wrangled Michael's listless body into the backseat with Allison. Bending over, he picked up Michael's legs and pushed them inside the car so he could close the door. With his knees pushed up out of the way, Michael flopped backward, bumping into Allison. His sparse hair, greasy with sweat from the mask, brushed her arm and she shuddered in disgust. That was a fun little moment, kind of puts you in the moment more. But it took me a little off guard because I don't really associate any type of human ailments to Michael. Like, what do you mean he has greasy hair? His body produces oil just like mine? For some reason, the imagery of Michael washing his hair or shaving his beard does not sit right with me. Now this next quote where Michael is killing Dr. Sartain might kind of piss you off because it raises more questions than it answers. The shape looks down expectantly. The doctor speaks, his voice weak and raw, but you promised I could watch. The shape no longer needs the doctor. As the shape lifts a boot over Sartain's head, the doctor grins, blood oozing from his split lips and loose teeth. The shape wonders if this is what the doctor wants after all, to serve the shape's purpose, but only for a moment. What do you mean Michael promised Sartain that he could watch? What do you mean the shape no longer needs the doctor? Did they chat? They chatted about Michael's escape? I guess just because Michael as an entity, not even as a character, is so ambiguous and there's a lot that's never going to be answered about him. So whenever you get these little tidbits that raise a bunch of questions, honestly, I just find it more frustrating because I have accepted the whole Michael is evil thing. I don't really see him as evil. I see him as curious, but I have accepted, okay, maybe he does plan, maybe he does assess, but I just always prefer to think of him as empty, no motivation, killing anyone right in front of him. So maybe the sections with Michael's perspective were in fact a mistake. Anyway, there's not too much different from here on out. The movie's almost over. Michael goes to Laurie's house. They have the big epic showdown, of course. One thing from the book I would have really liked to have seen is this moment of reckoning between Laurie and Karen. Karen is trying to brace herself. She's thinking about all these years of training that she had as a child and she's thinking, wow, I finally actually have to utilize this. Can I do it? When Lori ends up apologizing to her. Karen, I'm sorry for everything. Lori's eyes began to well up with tears, a rare show of weakness for her. Karen's mother prided herself on her strength and determination to be ready for every fight, never back down or surrender. Sensing her mother's vulnerability as a reflection of her own, Karen leaned into her mother and hugged her. After a startled moment, Lori hugged her fiercely in return. We got to see them all being badasses, swinging away at Michael, trapping him and all that. But a slow emotional moment, the calm before the storm, I would have really liked to see that. Also, remember how Lori finds Michael in the room full of mannequins? So I never realized before that he was the one that put them there. Unlike the clutter on the first floor, her bedroom decor tended toward the tastefully minimal, fewer distractions for the eyes, limited hiding places, so naturally her gaze shifted to 4 standing mannequins posed in silhouettes against the open glass balcony door. He's been busy. I love playful Michael, I think that's such a nice touch, but I had no idea. They really needed to establish Lori's room earlier in the movie as being really neat and tidy, and that way I would know that there was something different when there were a bunch of mannequins standing around. Because whenever I've watched the movie, like literally every single time, I'm just like, oh, that's the room where she keeps her shooting targets. Maybe I'm just dumb for not realizing that, but whatever. I love when Michael is playful, Michael the artist. Unfortunately, Michael the artist is also Michael the toasted marshmallow because he gets trapped by our lovely Strode ladies and is burning up. Let's see what he was thinking about during that scene. Wrapping both hands around the steel bars of the trap, the shape attacks the locked security gate with an inhuman strength and fury, rattling the cage within its housing. The dark force that drives the shape, that endlessly seeks to fulfill its purpose, does not tire or waver, does not stop or surrender, and continues to fight for the freedom to serve the purpose. When the flesh of the shape's palms begins to cook against the hot metal bars, the struggle continues. When the stairs beneath the shape begin to char and crumble, the struggle continues. When the air the shape breathes sears the shape's lungs, the struggle continues. When the coveralls catch fire and the mask begins to bubble and melt into the shape's hidden face, the struggle continues. And when all the flesh of the shape's body begins to sear and sizzle, the struggle continues. Burned hands rattle the cage, breathing becomes tortured, ragged, burned hands continue, heartbeat slows, the shape struggles. My thing with all the purpose shit is like, where was all this energy in Smith's Grove? I have more theories about that, but again, we have to visit them later when we talk about Halloween Ends. Here he's boiling alive like a lobster, and yet there is no ceasing in his fight to free himself. It also makes it seem like he's dying. It's very descriptive about how every single part of his body is just burning and bubbling up, and yet where was that energy in Smith's Grove? Well, I will have to let you pick my conspiracy theory brain another day. Like I said, that'll come back up again with Halloween Ends. So my dear maggoty little demon, if you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, what's stopping you? Don't you want to hear the rest? Don't you want to learn about the rest of the trilogy? Unfortunately, that is the note that I must leave you on today. After all of this, do I recommend reading the book to supplement the movie? Honestly, no. There aren't enough differences in this book for its existence to be justified, in my opinion. You basically end up just watching the movie in your head, but a lot slower. The only things that were worth it to me were getting a little bit more insight into Lori's PTSD, and I had like 2 or 3 different questions answered. I think that it raised more questions than it answered, and so ultimately, do I feel worse off for having read the book? I'll let you be the judge. What was the most jarring difference in your opinion? Are you now even more curious for the differences that I will cover in Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends? Because there are way more for those books, let me tell you. Let me know all about it in the comments down below, but while you're doing that, you also might take notice of the names scrolling on screen. These are my wonderful patrons, and we love them so much because without them, this video would not have come to you today. You would not believe the amount of hours I have spent working on this mini-series, and there is more to come. I probably spent more time writing and editing than I actually did reading the damn book, so these lovely patrons supplemented my income on those days when I was writing or editing. Just in all my vast preparation, they kept me afloat. And as a big thank you to them, I post 4 to 6 bonus videos over there every single month. These are all like bite-sized reviews of the movies that I don't give solo reviews on my main channel. Also, all of the copyrighted watch-alongs now live on Patreon that are not available on YouTube anymore. So definitely check that out, but if that's not for you, all the rest of my social media is listed down below. I always keep you up to date with what I'm doing on Instagram. Recently, I showed off my hermit station, my little writing desk, along with my hermit writing outfit, complete with fuzzy socks, sweatpants, oversized t-shirt, and robe. Oh, and greasy hair, greasy like Michael. So yeah, follow me over there to stay up to date with that if you'd like to. But more than anything, I just hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you're excited as we get closer to Halloween, and I hope I'll catch you in the next one. Bye!